You owe me this for dealing with Mom all these years. That was the text my brother sent me, right before he wiped out my entire bank account. I looked down at my phone and saw the balance. $0. $370,000 transferred out in seconds. That wasn't just savings. That was the special trust fund for my daughter Abigail's rehabilitation and her future education. It was her entire life, stolen by a man who felt entitled to a payday. My brother didn't just steal money. He stole a 10-year-old's chance at a normal life. Have you ever been treated like a personal bank account by your own family? Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is standing on our side today. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone across the room or scream into a pillow. Most people would have collapsed in despair, but the sad, guilty sister died the moment the balance hit zero. In her place stood the woman who hunts digital ghosts for a living. I am a cybersecurity analyst, and my brother just became my primary target. My anger wasn't loud. It was clinical. It was a balance sheet that no longer added up, and I was going to find every missing cent. The air in my Austin apartment felt stale, heavy with the weight of a betrayal that should have been impossible. I walked to my office, my movements precise and mechanical. I flipped the switch on my forensic workstation. The hum of the cooling fans was the only sound in the room, a low, steady growl that matched the rhythm of my heart. I didn't need a shoulder to cry on. I needed my dashboard. I logged in, my fingers dancing across the keys, with a speed born of a decade of professional pressure. $370,000. It is a specific number, a lethal number. To Zachary, it was a jackpot. To me, it was the forensic trail that would bury him. I didn't look at the banking app again. I pulled the raw transaction metadata. I needed to see the how before I dealt with the who. That is when I saw it. The breach did not come from a remote hacker in another country. It came from right here. I looked down at the small hardware security key, my YubiKey, plugged into my laptop. I touched it, and my stomach did a slow, cold roll. It was too light, too plastic. I pried it open with a letter opener. It was a dummy. A script kiddie toy designed to look identical to my real authentication device. Zachary had swapped them. He must have done it last week, when he came over to help me move Abigail's specialized medical equipment. He didn't just steal a password. He committed a physical intrusion into my secure network. He had used a ghost device to bypass my multi-factor authentication and siphon the trust fund into the void. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was playing a character in a movie. But Zachary is a former fund manager who failed because he couldn't handle reality. He didn't realize that when you steal from a specialist, you aren't just taking money. You are leaving a digital fingerprint on every single packet of data. I didn't call the police. Local cops are for stolen bicycles and noise complaints. They wouldn't know a shell company from a spreadsheet. I went deeper. I started the lockout protocols for my remaining accounts, isolating my paycheck and my retirement funds. Then I began the trace. I watched the lines of code populate the screen, mapping out where those $370,000 had landed. Zachary thought he had vanished into the shadows with his girlfriend. He thought he had outrun the boring sister. He was wrong. He wasn't running away. He was just providing me with more metadata. And in my world, metadata is a death sentence. I rubbed my eyes, trying to find a trace of regret, but there is only clarity. This isn't a family crisis. It is a balance sheet that has been in the red for far too long. For 5 years, I have been the silent investor in their version of a family. I lived in this modest Austin apartment, with its humming air conditioner and chipped paint, while my brother Zachary lived in a luxury condo I co-signed for because he couldn't pass a credit check. Why did I do it? Because I was tired of being the selfish one. That was the narrative my mother, Jennifer, and Zachary crafted the moment I moved away to build my career. To them, my success was a form of abandonment. I was the cold daughter who left, while Zachary was the saint who stayed in our hometown, supposedly carrying the burden of our aging mother. This is what I call the trap of normalized cruelty. It is a psychological mechanism where a family convinces you that your achievements are a debt you owe to the people you left behind. To earn my way back into their hearts, I had to pay a monthly subscription fee just to be tolerated. My compassion was a luxury they had overdrafted for years. I remember the day I added Zachary to my accounts. I was exhausted, recovering from a major security audit and feeling the sting of their latest guilt trip. Zachary stood in my kitchen, not asking how I was, but complaining that his car had broken down again. "I am the one carrying the weight of this family, Madison," he had said, looking around my office with visible envy. "You have the high-paying tech job. I have the responsibility." So I gave him access, just for emergencies, I told myself, just for groceries and mom's appointments. I thought I was buying peace. I didn't know then that you can't buy peace from people who profit from your war. Over the years, I watched the transactions. Bar tabs at 2 a.m, a brand new $60,000 pickup truck while I drove a 10-year-old sedan with squeaky brakes. I paid for his luxury lifestyle while I ate generic cereal to save $370,000 for Abigail's future. I told myself I was being a good sister. I told myself I was helping him get on his feet. But looking at that zero balance now, the fog has finally lifted. Zachary didn't steal that money because he was desperate. He stole it because he believed it was already his. In his mind, my hard work was just a natural resource. He was entitled to harvest. He thought I was an endless well. He forgot that when you drain the account, you also cancel the subscription. I am no longer paying to be part of their story. I am auditing it. And by the time I am done, the only thing Zachary will have left is a debt he can never repay. I was still staring at the forensic data when a notification chimed on my personal phone. A social media ping. Zachary had just posted a photo. He was standing in front of a fountain at the Lucky 7 casino, an arm around his girlfriend, holding a stack of $100 bills like it was a prop. The caption was just 3 words: "Big wins tonight." My blood didn't boil. It turned into liquid nitrogen. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He believed he was untouchable because he believed I was still the same person who would prioritize family peace over my own daughter's health. He was banking on my silence. He was counting on the fact that I had always been his safety net. Then my phone rang. It was my mother, Jennifer. I knew what she was going to say before I even answered, but I picked up anyway. I needed to hear it. I needed to know that the bridge was truly gone. "Madison, honey," she started, her voice already trembling with performative grief. "I talked to Zachary. He told me everything. He's in a bad place, Madison. He made a mistake, a big one. But he is your brother. We have to keep this within the family. If you call the police, you will destroy his life. Think about what that would do to me. He stole $370,000 from Abigail." "Mom," I said, my voice flat. "He stole her ability to walk without pain." "He will pay it back," she shrieked. "He just needs a win. He is at the casino trying to double it for her. He is doing it for the family. Please, Madison, don't be the one who breaks us apart." I hung up without another word. The silence that followed was heavy. I sat there in the dark, thinking about the chains I had been wearing for years. They were invisible, forged from guilt, and the misplaced hope that if I just gave enough, I would eventually be loved enough. It was a prison without bars. I had been a survivor of my family's toxicity, thinking that my endurance was a virtue. I thought my silence was protection for Abigail. But looking at that screen, I realized I wasn't protecting her. I was teaching her how to be a victim. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around. Abigail was standing in the doorway, clutching her tablet like a shield. She looked so small in her oversized pajamas, but her eyes were terrifyingly clear. She wasn't crying. There was no fear in her expression, only a dark, adult understanding that no 10-year-old should ever have to possess. Is it gone, Mom? She asked. Her voice was steady, a contrast to the storm I knew was inside her. The money for the special school? The money for my surgery? Yes, Abigail, I said. I was done lying. Your Uncle Zachary took it. She walked over to me and looked at the screen, at the metadata, at the photo of the man who had traded her future for a weekend at a casino. She didn't scream. She didn't ask why. She looked at me with a fierce clarity that made my heart ache. Then we take him down, she said. It wasn't a question. It was an order from the only person in this family whose opinion actually mattered. I can help, Mom. I know the passwords he saves in my games when he uses my tablet. I know where he hides things. I looked at my daughter, and for the first time that night, I didn't feel the weight of those invisible chains. I felt the sharp, cold edge of a weapon. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. I reached out and took her hand. It was time to stop being the selfish daughter and start being the most dangerous person Zachary ever met. I pulled a chair up for Abigail. She didn't flinch at the lines of scrolling code. To her, math was a language, and right now, we were translating a betrayal. I pulled the raw transaction metadata from the breach. The $370,000 hadn't just vanished into Zachary's pocket. That would have been too simple, too traceable. Instead, the funds had been routed through a series of digital hops, designed to mask the final destination. But Zachary isn't a mastermind. He is a man who thinks he is smarter than the systems I build every day. I traced the routing number of the receiving account. It belonged to an entity called Obsidian Ventures Limited Liability Company. The name sounded familiar, a ghost in the back of my mind from a corporate audit I'd conducted 2 years ago. I opened my private work files and ran a search through the federal watch list. A match populated the screen instantly. Obsidian Ventures was flagged in a federal database as a known money laundering front for an online gambling syndicate operating out of Eastern Europe. My stomach didn't drop this time. It hardened. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was a felony. By wiring that money into a sanctioned criminal entity, Zachary hadn't just stolen from his niece. He had engaged in international wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. He had crossed the line from a bad brother to a national security liability. Then Abigail pointed to a subdirectory in the metadata logs she'd been scanning on her own tablet. Mom, look at the registration signatures, she whispered. I zoomed in on the founding documents of Obsidian Ventures. There, buried in the encrypted metadata of the initial filing, was a digital signature linked to an old alias, Z-Man34. It was Zachary's handle from his days as a fund manager. He wasn't just using this company to hide the money. He was a secret co-founder. He had been siphoning my support payments for years to build this engine of fraud. This was the lethal discovery. He wasn't a victim of his circumstances. He was the architect of my daughter's misery. Every cent I had given him for groceries or gas had been an investment in this criminal enterprise. I didn't pick up the phone to call the local precinct. In my line of work, we have a direct line to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. It is called a Suspicious Activity Report, or an SAR. Usually, the government takes days to process these. But when a specialist flags a transaction as potential terrorist financing or international money laundering involving a known shell entity, the system reacts with predatory speed. I typed in the transaction identification number. I flagged Obsidian Ventures as the recipient. I hit submit. It was the financial equivalent of calling in an airstrike on my own bank account. Within minutes, the trap snapped shut. The banking system's automated defenses turned everything Zachary touched into ice. He wasn't going to Cabo. He wasn't going anywhere. He had just become the most high-profile target in the United States Treasury's database. This wasn't revenge. This was a professional reckoning. The phone didn't just ring, it screamed. I watched the screen glow with my brother's name. I didn't pick up. I let it ring twice, 3 times. letting the vibration rattle the coffee cup Abigail had left on the desk. Panic is a predictable variable in a forensic audit. The longer the subject waits, the more they overcalculate. When I finally answered, I didn't say a word. I just listened to the sound of his ragged breathing. "What the hell did you do, Madison?" he roared. The sound was so distorted I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "What did you do?" I pitched my voice up an octave, layering it with a tremor that was purely performative. "Zachary, I was just about to call you. I woke up and the account is locked. I can't even get into the portal. I think someone hacked us." "You liar," he screamed. "I'm at the ATM. It ate my card. The screen says, Federal freeze." "Federal, Madison, you called the feds on me?" "I didn't call anyone," I sobbed, forcing a hollow sound into my chest. "I'm terrified, Zachary. That was $370,000. That was all the money for Abigail. If the government has it, we're never getting it back. You have to help me fix this." There was a long silence on the other end. I could practically hear the gears grinding in his desperate mind. He was a former fund manager who had just laundered $370,000 into a sanctioned crime syndicate. If he didn't deliver that money to Obsidian Ventures, he wasn't just broke. He was a liability to people who didn't use lawyers to settle debts. Right now, he needed me to be the naive, submissive sister one last time. "Listen to me," he hissed, his voice dropping to a dangerous low vibrato. "You need to call the bank. You need to tell them the transfer was authorized. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you were confused. Do it right now." "I don't know what to say to them," I stammered, twisting a loose thread on my sleeve. "The bank keeps asking for verification codes I don't have. They said, we need to sign a physical release form because of the amount. Please, Zachary, you have to come over. We can sign whatever papers they need. I just want the money back for my daughter." "I'm coming," he said, and the malice in his voice was cold enough to frost the windows. "And you better not be playing games, Madison. If I get to that house and find out you're stalling, I swear to God, I will burn that place to the ground with you and that little math freak inside it." The line went dead. I lowered the phone. My hand wasn't shaking. My eyes were dry. I looked at Abigail, who was sitting at the kitchen table, watching me with wide, expectant eyes. "Is he coming?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my voice returning to its natural, clinical tone. "He's coming." I walked over to the front door and disengaged the chain, but I left the deadbolt locked for now. I turned off the porch light. I wanted him to think I was hiding. I wanted him to think he was walking into a house of victims. He didn't know he was walking into a federal honeypot. The suspicious activity report wasn't just a freeze. It was a beacon. By the time my brother pulled into my driveway, he wouldn't just be dealing with an angry sister. He would be dealing with the full, unyielding weight of the United States government. The trap was set. Now we just had to wait for the wolf to reach the door. They didn't knock. They attacked the door. The sound of Zachary's fist hammering against the wood echoed through the hallway like a series of gunshots. Outside, I could hear him screaming, his voice pitched high with a frantic, desperate rage that no longer bothered me. "Open the door, Madison. I know you're in there. Stop hiding and give me my money." He wasn't just talking to me. He was performing for the neighbors, trying to set a narrative where I was the thief holding his property hostage. It was the same tactic he'd used since we were toddlers scream loud enough, and people will assume you're the victim just to get some quiet. I looked at Abigail. She was standing in the kitchen, clutching her tablet like a shield, her face a mask of calm determination. She nodded once. I walked to the door, took a deep breath, and disengaged the deadbolt. I swung it open. Zachary stood on the porch, his face flushed and sweating despite the cool night air. Nicole hovered behind him, her designer bag clutched to her chest, her eyes darting around with a new, sharp edge of fear. Zachary didn't wait. He shoved past me into the foyer, his fingers shaking in my face. "You think this is funny? Freezing my accounts? Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I didn't freeze them, Zachary," I said. my voice as level and clinical as an audit report. Liar! The ATM said federal freeze. You called the bank. Fix it. Tell them it was authorized right now, or I swear to God. He truly believed he could still bully his way out. He thought he was still the saint, and I was still the selfish one. I reached into the folder I was holding and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I handed it to him. It was the Suspicious Activity Report, stamped with the red seal of the United States Treasury. I can't call them, I said, because I didn't do it. The Treasury Department did. When you moved $370,000 into a sanctioned shell account, you didn't just transfer funds. You triggered a federal wire trap. You didn't send money to Cabo. You sent a beacon to the FBI. Nicole let out a strangled gasp. Bait money? Evidence, I corrected. Zachary staggered back, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. You set me up? You ratted on your own family? You're not family, I said, stepping closer until he had to look me in the eye. You are a liability. You are a debt that has finally been called in. You didn't just steal from me. You stole from a child who couldn't defend herself. Your case number is 49B, and you are done. Blue and red lights suddenly flooded the room, cutting through the darkness of the front yard. 4 black SUVs blocked the driveway, their engines idling with a low, menacing hum. Special agents emerged, weapons drawn, their voices a synchronized chorus of authority. Federal agents, hands where we can see them. I watched the arrogance strip away from Zachary's face in real time. He collapsed to his knees, pleading like the child he had never outgrown. Madison, please, tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I'm your brother. You're unauthorized, I said, and I stepped back as the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. I watched Nicole cut a deal with the agents. Before they even reached the end of the driveway, I watched my brother be dragged into the back of a van, still screaming my name, still blaming me for the consequences of his own choices. When the street finally went quiet, I locked the door and engaged the chain. Abigail was standing in the kitchen. Is he gone? She asked. Yes, I said. He's gone. Good, she breathed. Now we can fix my legs. Zachary got 15 years in a federal facility for money laundering and wire fraud. My mother, Jennifer, tried to sue me for emotional distress, but the case was dismissed before it even hit a docket. She lives in a small, one-bedroom rental now, having sold everything to pay the legal fees Zachary incurred before his public defender took over. I don't answer her calls. I don't check her emails. I have finally unsubscribed from her guilt. The $370,000 was recovered, along with an additional $50,000 in compensation from the seized assets of Obsidian Ventures. Abigail had her surgery 3 months later. It was a long, grueling recovery, but she never complained. Today, I watched her run. No pain, no limp, no specialized equipment, just a 10-year-old girl racing across the grass in an Austin park. I've used a portion of the settlement to establish the Abigail Foundation. We provide pro bono cybersecurity and forensic accounting services to families trapped in situations of financial abuse and emotional debt. We help people realize that they don't have to keep paying for their own existence. People ask me if I feel guilty. I don't. I miss the brother I imagined I had, but I don't miss the man who stole from my child. This wasn't revenge. It was the justice of a sower. You reap exactly what you plant. Zachary planted betrayal, and he harvested the weight of the law. I planted a boundary, and I harvested a future. Silence isn't lonely. It's peaceful. And sometimes, protecting your future means amputating your past. Madison chose her daughter's future over a toxic sibling. If you believe that protecting the future is more important than covering up rot, then please hit like and share this story.